Hi guys, my name is Christina and welcome to my channel. For the ones who are new here, this channel is all about creating comics where I share my experience of how I create my own comic and teach you everything about drawing and writing aspect of it, but also we're talking about art in general, how to learn art, how to be an artist as your day job, and how to do all of this good stuff. And if you're interested in any of this, you can subscribe, share, and like, and help the channel and me, hopefully in turn, will help you. So this is the first video in a series of videos that are all about how to create a comic, and I'm going to be very thorough and I'm gonna go through everything you need to know and everything I learned and everything I think it's gonna be useful for you to create your own comic, from really starting from nada to finish the first chapter. In this video in particular, we're gonna talk about developing idea for your comic. Point one is getting an inspiration, and I'm being like sarcastic about inspiration because I'm overall don't take inspiration serious. There's two terms in art industry, in art sphere, is talent and inspiration. I'm not particularly a fan of either of those terms because I think that there is so much emphasis on those terms that shouldn't be. Inspiration is not something that finishes work, and talent is not something that makes you a better artist. Just this aside, using inspiration in this particular context, I'm talking about what sparks the idea, initial interest, initial like hinge, one of those cheeches. This pull on your attention, like something that keeps grabbing your attention and make you focus on something, make you think about something. So think about what is this point of inspiration is for you. It might be something absolutely recent, like for me creating my whole comic. I'm currently on chapter 8, more than 300 pages in, more than 10 years of work in. The inspiration for my comic I got from some anime clip, and there was just a shadowy figure with eyes. I think it was like a fan-made clip of Hellsing anime, and I just saw this black figure with eyes and I was like inspired. That started the whole thing. I don't know, it might be something like this for you, something you see in some other media or something you see in art of other artists, and you just like the vibe of this, you just like the feeling of this, like something triggers your mind to start thinking. It might be either that or something that keeps inspiring you your whole life. For example, if you are really like this, another thing that inspires me, I'm really inspired by nature, by sky and mountains, and this is something that I incorporate in my story. So for me it was never a question whether it's going to be fantasy or anything else. Fantasy, because I get to draw a lot of landscapes. So for me, that is a constant inspiration. Another thing, well, it's like me as a kid, but it works. I'm constantly inspired by horses. Horses is just my jazz, and basically all my early art from the age of 3 to maybe age 7 is Christina drawing horses. Horses. Comics is about horses. Sometimes comics is about deers, like anything that has hoofs and like slim and grace. I don't know. That was my whole jazz. So if there is something that keeps inspiring you your whole life, that might be an area you want to discover. So this is two ways where you want to work, where you might want to look for inspiration. It's either something that keeps inspiring you or something that just, starts your imagination. You see something and it just, your mind started just going with it. Like you saw a millisecond of a moment, but your mind just keeps rolling for days and days and days. That might be something that you want to look into and capture this feeling that got you interested. And this is overall very fun part. So enjoy, don't restrict yourself at all. Just go with whatever you want and just explore. This is a very, very fun part. But I also suspect that it's not the part that you have your most problems with. Usually a lot of artists get actually stuck on this particular part, gets constantly inspired, start drawing something, or writing something, and then like inspiration gone or something else inspires them and they just don't want to do it anymore. It happens to me as well. Sometimes I'm thinking about something or I see something interesting and I have idea of this painting that I'm gonna make that's gonna be so awesome, and it's all about this thing that you just saw that inspired me. But in the end, by the time I, actually go and do this, the inspiration is really gone. So this is what's gonna bring us to the next point. And the next point number 2, is how to make sure and how to like double check if your idea and the source of inspiration is substantial and this is something that's gonna carry you through potentially through the whole project. To me, there's really 3 things that you need to check, at least one of them, to make sure it's something that you're gonna be consistently interested in. Is it an area of your interest overall? Just for example, if you wanna create a story or, create a comic about, for example, example, a country life. Is country life something that you really like? Or about traveling? Do you really like traveling? If that's something that you like already, that's something that you think about considering, looking Pinterest images on, watching YouTube videos on this topic about. If it's something that you're already doing, that's your thing. That's pretty good. It means it's probably this idea, if it's already in this area, it will be very sustainable. Another thing is a genre, and that's kind of close to previous point, but it's a little different. So genre that you feel the most comfortable in. It might be the situation that you really like different genres. It might be more difficult for you to pinpoint. So I would suggest pick a genre that you are naturally not necessarily watch the most. I personally I create my art in fantasy genre, but I don't watch this much fantasy actually for some reason. But it should be the genre that you're the most comfortable in exploring, because in the end of the day, genre is just a marketing category, and what it is just the way of talking about the topic. Think about the genre just the same as, for example, you're thinking about essay for school, like one type of essay that's supposed to be 5 pages, or just one sheet essay, or a very long one that you need to write that have to be 30 pages and you need to increase your font to make it happen. Think about it about just the medium or just the format of how you present your idea. So which format you're the most naturally comfortable with. Just I think this is a good idea to think about genre, just the one that is comfortable, or you understand the rules of which better, or the one that is just you think there's a lot of more that can be explored. For example, this is how I feel about fantasy. Even though we have a lot of fantasy around, I feel like fantasy is so underexplored actually. We have a lot of fantasy, but all of them seems to be like so specific. It's still continuation of the Tolkien style fantasy. Obviously there's some different ones, but mostly it's still within that realm, and it doesn't have to be. And I think, for example, this genre, I feel like there is something unexplored there, and I still feel very comfortable in this genre as well. I like the freedom, I like the ability to use the whole genre as a metaphor overall, where I can create monsters, I can create some events, and they can be metaphorical, like the magical element can act as a metaphor. That's something that was attracting to me. For me, fantasy was an easy choice, just because of the landscapes that I can draw, and because I feel like the genre has a lot more to discover and, do in it. And also because I feel comfortable in that, and because like it serves my story and serves the style of storytelling that I like. So if the genre kind of meets this criteria for you, and the story that inspiration that you got is within, like, fits comfortably within the genre, that's a pretty good sign. It's possibly feel that the story that you have in mind and like ideas that you have in mind is sustainable and you can continue working on it for a long time. And another point that I want to mention is that the character of interest. Some stories are plot driven, some stories are world driven, and some stories are character driven. And sometimes the main focus and the main inspiration comes from the character. So for example, there is a type of a person that you want to explore. Is the time of the personal journey that you want to explore. Is the type of a personality, the type of a spirit that you want to explore, or even the gender that you want to explore. For example, you want to write for example, you're a female and you want to write a female character to kind of explore the aspects of a female. It's actually like how sometimes I feel about my characters. I like, depending on their gender, I like to analyze what gender means or what like this particular gender can be. So to me, this is an aspect that I'm very interested. Or for example, you might be interested in more psychological process of the character and see how the character goes from one psychological state to another psychological state, or how they overcome difficulties, or vice versa, how they, completely overwhelmed by the difficulties and become an anti-hero of a sort. Character can be a very cool driving force as well if there is already something that you're interested in. For example, you're noticing that you do really like certain types of characters in books, that you do like certain characters of real people, or there is something about even yourself that you want to discover, but you feel like your life is a little boring, so you discover it in a different setting. Kind of like certain problems or certain thoughts, certain ideas, and certain characters and personality, and how people bounce off of each other, something like this. If there's something about human psyche basically that really interests you, it means that it's a very high chance that your story is sustainable and you're gonna continue working on it. Next point number 3, is how to get your idea flowing. So you got the idea, it's around area of my interest, how to get it flowing. And what I noticed, one thing is that for me, what personally works is that I start writing it or I start drawing it. I almost feel like there's like limited space in my brain, and I get inspired, I start rolling some ideas in my head, I keep rolling them, but once I actually put them on paper, it's almost almost like the space freed, and now more ideas come and start rolling, more ideas come and start rolling. So for me, what really helps is like putting it down, writing it down, drawing it, sketching it out, doing like even like a bullet points, or for example, if I have some ideas of like a plot stuff or some character development stuff, I just put it down, or some characters, some creatures, some monsters, some magical aspects of the world, I just start putting down and more comes. I put it down, and sometimes while I put it down, I see problems with this particular idea, and I be like, oh, it's not as solid and robust as I thought. So I start thinking about it more, and then more ideas come and like more robust idea forms. So that what really helps me, and I recommend you try it if there is, you think it's something that can be helpful. Another point is that start researching. If, for example, you really know that it's set in certain part of the world, or you know it has to do with certain science aspect, or it has to do, for example, with spaceships, with the flying machines, or for example, it has to do with some like spaceships or something that you really need to think about how it works, or it's a story about like people who are pilot real planes, or you know, people like it's something like every story has something specific that you need to know that you don't know, unless you're really like doing some autobiography, which is a completely different thing on its own. Usually it's something in the story that you don't know, and you need to do a massive research. And as you will do research, it will give you more food for thought and more ideas and more ways that you can work around it and create plot around it, characters around it, problems around it, like conflicts in the story around it. So just start researching like crazy. Consume everything about the topics that are presented in your story. That will spark more ideas and more inspiration on its own. This is, I think, really also a great way to get your brain rolling and just continue ideas to come. And the last point is obviously consume other media. And I actually don't think that you need to consume specifically the media that you're producing. Maybe some caveat here, because if you're doing something commercially, so you're a commercial artist, so yeah, you should definitely be reading and inspecting what other people doing in your area, because commercial, when you produce something commercially, it's a little different because you really need to know like the market and everything that's happening. But it's not necessary to do this. For example, if you're an aspiring writer and you want to publish later on, it's good to know what a market is, but it's not, I don't think it's necessary to know exactly like commercial standards and everything, because it's always changing, new things always coming. Maybe you're the new thing. Don't get too focused on that. Still be within reasonable range, but just consume media that is close to what you're doing, but not super close. So, because what happens when I notice when you read something that is super close, or like watch movies or cartoons that are something close, or play games. These days, games have great storytelling. Good games have great storytelling. If you consume something that is very, very similar to what you're doing, what might happen is that you might lose interest in your own project just because it's just too similar. You already just have this movie, you're rolling it, and or you binge watching this TV show that has 400 episodes, and why go and do exactly the same thing? Not exactly the same, but very close. It can get like stagnant, or whatever thing can happen, you just start subconsciously grabbing some elements. It's not plagiarism, but it's just subconsciously because you think that's all of it. But if you are, for example, watching something in the similar genre, but still a little different than what you are doing, it can help you to be inspired enough, but also to be original and still be very inspired about your own story, because it's a little different. So it always will be fresh. And you will not be able to just grab elements, and you will not be doing it subconsciously, just because actually you will see some element present in that story, but it won't work for your story. So it will actually trigger your brain to start working on the solution for your story, and you'll start coming up with more creative things. So I think this is also a good thing that can help you to just get inspired, but with not too similar content that your own. Step number 4 is troubleshooting. And you will need to troubleshoot at some point, because inspiration are going to keep bubbling, new ideas keep bubbling, new research keep going and everything, and you will start having the story slowly emerge. But the thing that you need to keep in mind is that the story needs to be workable, your plot needs to work, and at some point you will start noticing that, okay, I see a problem here, how these things are gonna connect. Or, for example, sometimes you don't see a problem and you just keep going, and in the end you have like this whole structure of a plot, a whole structure of the world building or magic system that is not really logical, it's just a combination of your inspiration. So at this point, I remember really strongly when I had this moment where I had this, a lot of ideas, my world would have started to come together, and at this point I would really enjoy talking it through with someone. And I would enjoy talking it through with my friends, and then I would talk it through, but they would ask questions where they didn't get why certain things are the way they are. They're like, okay, why this thing is this way? Or like, how exactly are they doing this? Or something like this. They will be asking questions not because they looking for plot holes in your story or looking for plot holes in your world building, but because they're really listening and they want to understand and they thought they maybe missed something. And that will actually make you really realize where you have weak points that you need to work on. I really enjoyed doing this with my dad because he is a very smart man, and every time I would tell him this story, and he is a lawyer, so he is very structured. Every time I would tell him, well, so then those people started war here and here, and he's like, why? Why did they start a war? Well, because they have this border together and they always want this land. And then I was like, why do you want this land? And I would be like, don't people usually want land? He's like, no, like if the land we want just for space, is it good agricultural land? Is it good for warfare? Is it good for, I don't know, some magical stuff? And I would be like, oh my God, I didn't think that through. And a lot of things he would just ask why in the moment where least expected. And this is the thing I adopted and I use all the time, even when I don't have to run my ideas by him. Actually, now it's probably hard for him to follow through my comic because it has a lot of stuff going on. But basically, I would ask why myself. I would be like, well, they're going to do this. Why? This character really wants to go there. Why? This place is the capital. Why? This is the ruler of this country. By asking why, first of all, it's gonna troubleshoot a lot and it's gonna immediately show you your weak points, but it also can spark the whole new area of ideas that can make your story way better and way cooler. And I recommend whying a lot because it helps your story to become more robust, more whole. And even if you never explain the whys, the answers to the whys will still be felt in your story. Like, even if you don't explain why certain thing is the way it is, in the story people will be able to notice that it is thought through. You always can tell when the writer or artist they thought things through, and even without them actually saying it. So I highly recommend just whying everything. Ask why here, there, for everything, and talk to people. Try to explain your story and see where they missing something, when they don't get it, or they just disagree that things gonna go this way. Those areas, for example, don't mean that you have to redo them. It just means you have to clarify them better and make a reasoning understood to your reader. This troubleshooting is very important, and you want to do it at this stage. You will have to troubleshoot the whole process of you creating your story all the time. But this major troubleshooting happens when your world is just coming together and you like starting noticing holes amongst all the cool stuff that you came up with. So yeah, troubleshoot, look for problems, ask people to show you problems, and ask whys. And a fifth point is how to keep your story focused. This is something that I'm still thinking about actually, but I think it's a very important aspect to mention, just because you can have all of this interesting plots, you can have this character journeys, you can have this magic system, this world, this battle that has to be over, but at some point the story has to come together in some overarching way. And what is the story about? What's the point of this story? All the good stories, they have this layer of purpose, this like connective tissue of the reason why they were created. And I don't think it's something that author can successfully create necessarily consciously. They might if there's like a shorter story, but I think it's also very hard to explain how to make it happen, or it's a very vague concept. But this is something that I noticed, that the purposeness, like the purpose of the story, if the story has it in it, it feels more whole, it feels more important, it feels more necessary to read, it feels like something that people would want to recommend. And a couple things, I guess, this is something I keep thinking about. It's sometimes I'm looking, I'm like, what's the purpose of my story? Why? Who needs that? It's something that I think is naturally created, where there is something you want to tell, or there is some emotion that you want to evoke, or there is some message that you want to send. And the message doesn't have to be like, don't do this, kids. It can be something about, it's more vague. It doesn't have to be like, because it's not a plot message, it's not the thematic message, it's more over like why you're saying this, like what you want to kind of communicate to your reader, when you want your reader to feel good, when you want your reader to start worrying about the situation that they're in, what you want your readers to start appreciate their own life. Do you want your readers to escape the world for a little while? Like that type of thing, like this very ambiguous, vague sort of thing. And I think if you put it in your story and if you keep thinking about it, and if you have this kind of focus on that, I think it adds some interesting level in your story that will make it feel very important and very special and wholesome. I don't know. I think that is some weird secret ingredient that you can add into your story, and I think it's good to think about this aspect during the idea development stage. So yeah, so I think this is another one that you want to consider. And the last point number 6, let your story breathe and let your story take you places where you don't expect. And especially if the story is long, and my story is long, it's just because making comics is long. Making comics it's like a long process, so I will be working for it for years and years, and I can tell that my own values and my own ideas are changing as I'm creating my comic, and that's why I know like in 10 chapters my comic will evolve with me as well, and I have to just let it, and it's okay. And even whatever you're writing, whatever you're creating, whether it's a comic, well, this series about comics, but it can be applicable to writing as well. It's just let your story do its thing. Maybe sometimes new ideas will come to you. Allow it to change, allow it to flow, allow it to breathe, allow it to be itself, and allow it to surprise you. And I think that's the magical thing that can happen when your story goes somewhere and you realize that you are learning something from your own story, however weird it sounds. But there's definitely this miracle that stories can do, and writing the stories have this aspect to it, and just let it. Don't force it. And I think you can find a lot of joy while letting your story kind of tell itself sometimes, or just thinking, what is the story wants to tell me? And something like this, I think, can make your story also richer and more vibrant and more alive, and especially if you're writing a long story, as I mentioned. But even with the short story, it's still the same. It might be a short story that has something in there for you as well. Overall, just enjoy the process, have fun. This is beautiful. Creating stories is amazing. It's amazing thing, and whoever does it, they know it. So yeah, I hope this video is helpful. Next video in the series coming up soon. Doesn't necessarily gonna be the next video chronologically, but it's coming in soon. And if you have your own thoughts about how to develop ideas, please leave them in the comments down below and let me and other people read them. Sharing is caring, you guys. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. Thank you guys.